I'm not going to say anything about our guest speaker, Laura, because that is Veronica's job as our session leader. But I did want to just say that I, as someone at FIU in DC who sees our mission as fostering representation and diversity in Congress and throughout the government, the role I play in that is what you're seeing here today, helping FIU students like you learn about and access such roles. I follow Laura on Twitter and LinkedIn, and on a daily basis, see things that are a combination of fantastic resources, reports and statistics and information about representation in Congress and how to foster it that are useful to me, as we have even shared them with our own South Florida congressional offices, and are equally parts motivation to remind me why this work is so important, and sometimes gives me a sense of purpose during the day. So I want to thank Laura for being here, but I'm going to turn it over to Veronica to introduce her and run the session.
And thank you so much for joining us, Laura. My name is Veronica, like Eric said, and I'm currently a junior at FIU. I'm studying public administration and political science, so I'm very excited to get to hear from you today. To give the rest of you a little bit of background on Laura, she is the Associate Director for Constructive Politics at Democracy Fund, which is an independent foundation working to ensure that our political system is able to withstand new challenges and deliver on its promise to the American people. Their focus is on constructive politics, and Laura leads the governance program strategy to explore what unites us while helping governing institutions become more diverse, inclusive, and better able to serve all Americans. So I'm super excited to kind of jump right into our session. Laura, if you wouldn't mind describing the Democracy Fund's role in the DC ecosystem, what work is directly done by your team, what projects are managed by your grantees and partners, and most of all, how do you solicit and assess what other organizations you work with?
Well, I want to take a step back and say good morning, everybody. And I have a very special relationship with FIU for many reasons. One of them being that I used to represent and work very closely with Carlos when I was at HACU and represented Hispanic serving institutions. So I'm very familiar with the awesome work that FIU has been leading down in Florida. And my family lives in Miami, so some of my cousins are also students at the institution. So I'm super excited to be here today. And all of my DC crew is also FIU alums, so I'm pretty embedded in that system. And you're all awesome. So I'm so glad to be here. So Veronica, thanks for that question. It's a really big question. I'll try to sort of place it in context. And I hope that someday, by the way, we get to meet in person here in DC so you can sort of see the DC ecosystem firsthand. So Democracy Fund is a foundation, and what that means is we are a nonprofit, but our work is primarily in funding other organizations that do work, whether it's advocacy or promoting different systems, promoting representation. The organizations that do a lot of the work in DC and are on the front lines of engaging members of Congress and others and other elected officials around issues that are important to maintain a healthy democracy. So where Democracy Fund is a little bit different than other foundations is that we don't just give out money and then take a step back. We're actually very involved with our grantees as well. And there are places where we have a little bit more of an independent voice in the system. So the Constructive Politics track, which I lead, is really focused on trying to figure out how do we get to a healthier Congress. And so a lot of the work that we have done, at the beginning, it sounded kind of strange to members of Congress because not a lot of people think about them, right? Members of Congress are there to represent us. And so we're always demanding from them, but not a lot of folks are sort of thinking through, but what does it take for them as a workplace to function? And so a lot of the organizations that we support, that's just what they do. They provide a lot of leadership development for members of Congress, for their staff. And part of the program that I helped set up at Democracy Fund also started to look really deeply at polarization in America and hyperpartisanship and how that was affecting the ability of members of Congress to carry out their work. So the current portfolio that I lead is anchored in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We really believe that to have a healthier Congress and healthier governing institutions, they need to be representative and they need to be diverse. They need to be diverse and they need to be inclusive, sorry. Inclusion, to me, as we talk up through how we want to talk about polarization in America, really is that piece where people actually feel like they belong. Like, how do you create an institution? How do you ensure that our governing institutions that represent all of us are able to effectively bridge all of us into them and make everybody feel like they belong? I believe that a lot of us tend to focus pretty heavily on diversity. So really the pieces around changing the people in the system as the answer to that, because it's a space that we know better. So we understand how to change the people in the system. We know the tactics to do that. We know how to measure it. We know what it can look like. And we know how to do it. Like, whether we do it or not, that's a different story. But we know how to increase diversity. What we know less about as a country is how to be inclusive. And so when you think about polarization, you have to think that America is already diverse, but we haven't figured out how to function in that beautiful diversity. And you can see it through our corporate, like all of these investments that have been made. You can call it collaboration, you can call it bipartisan relationship building, you can call it negotiation. At the end of the day, it's inclusion. And really, what I'm really interested in supporting out in the universe are different models to try to figure out, how do we do inclusion better? Like, how can we experiment with different ways of creating inclusive decision making? And so the work that I've been funding is focused on, yes, experimenting with that in Congress, but also at the state and local level. And when you're looking at communities all over the country, what is driving them towards that division? And can we come up with new ways of bridging those divides, of bringing more people in to the decision-making process, of switching this dynamic where we, as a set of elites, comes up with what the solutions should be, but then our strategy is, how do we ram it down people's throats? Instead of, how do we come up with those recommendations and those solutions together? And I know that that sounds broad, but that's sort of the space that I'm operating in. And we can talk, Veronica, a little bit more about what it looks like in practice, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I imagine that it's difficult to build these relationships because I think a lot of Americans have the impression that we're more divided than ever. So as someone who focuses on that, do you find that to be the case? Do you find that we're more divided than ever? And how do the programs that you fund, how are they effective in kind of bridging that gap?
We are more divided than ever. We can go back and talk about other periods where America has been divided, but I think what is, to me, most different about those other periods of time, you know, the world wars, the Vietnam War, like those two people feel like periods that were pretty close to where we are now. But the difference to me is that we are at a moment of reckoning. We, as a nation, we believe that our democracy is really old and that we have been experimenting with this for over 200 years. And the fact is that we have not, because we haven't really been operating as a democracy until the civil rights movement in the 60s. And even then, and even now, there are a lot of forces in the system that are pushing to disenfranchise people. And you cannot be, right, a representative democracy if large segments of the population cannot engage. And in the way that they can realistically engage. So I think that that dynamic makes this moment different than other moments, because we have to bridge. Traditionally, a lot of the groups that do bridging, they go into it as a red and blue divide kind of bridging. Let's take a step back 4 years ago. In 2016, well, early 2017, I came to Democracy Fund. Actually, I think this week is my 4-year anniversary. And a lot of these, the United States, when we would talk about democracy or a healthy democracy, we always looked at other countries, because to us, we were already healthy. So our investments would be in peace building in other countries, in focusing on bridging divides in other countries, and how you brought people together, you know, in the extreme cases, right? Like the Rwandan genocide. Like when we would do that kind of peace building, we weren't ever looking internally until 2016. And when that happened, and all of a sudden everybody started thinking, oh my God, we're so divided. We have to look inward. We have to figure out how we're going to bridge internally. So really only for the last 4 years is like when the field, so the organizations that focus on peace building, that movement started to grow in the United States with a focus on bridging divides in the United States. And so we're really new, like that kind of movement to figure out how do you bridge the divides in America is fairly new. And then what is different about it too, going back to my initial point, is that it came out of an understanding that people were divided by red and blue. So in the beginnings of that conversation, there was all these people talking about civility and respect and creating safe spaces. And I was like, none of this is safe, okay? Because at the end of the day, we are bridging literal difference. We are literally different. We are pushing back against the people that don't look like us. And so that is not what is red and blue, is that certain people that look more like each other have rallied around one side of the aisle. And then it creates sort of that dynamic. But we haven't really reckoned with racial inequality in our country, right? And when we're talking about division, like, it really is grounded on what I said before, that we have to figure out how to be plural. We need to understand how to be inclusive and how to live uncomfortably in that diversity, because our differences and what fundamentally ties us to this country, like going back, let's take a step back and let me ground this so it doesn't sound so broad. When you're saying that you want to go to Congress and get allies or build a coalition around an issue, a lot of people start from the premise that we must have something in common, right? And that commonality can be, well, we all want the best for our kids. We all want to live in healthy communities. We all want to have our kids have the best education possible, right? And that those things should be enough to bring us together. But if you dig deeper and you go to that table with that person that you agree with, even if they're on the other side of the aisle, but then you think that that person, even though you may agree on that issue, stands for values that go fundamentally against your own, and that those values could go all the way down into really your understanding of what makes you American versus somebody else's understanding of what makes them American, that's deep conflict. That is deep difference. And what we are trying to experiment with right now is how do you hold those things in a space so you can negotiate. If you come to the table and you believe that the person that you're trying to negotiate with is a white supremacist, like let's just put it in the extremes, that is what we are dealing with, right? It is very difficult to then say, I'm going to negotiate legislatively towards an end. And so this really affects not only the conversations that you're having at your dining room tables with your families who may be different, but at a magna, right, like at a country level, when you think about our institutions of government functioning and coming together to legislate, that is the tension that you're holding. So yes, we are divided. And the reason that it is hard right now is because we need to figure out what new tools we sort of develop to navigate in that conflict and the uncomfortable. And civility is not enough. We actually have to lean into that discomfort. We have to lean into the difficult conversations. And I think one of the best examples I have of an organization, I think their brand is awesome. So I'll just put this out there, and I'll add the link to the chat, but I have an organization that we support called the Better Arguments Project. And that's exactly what we're trying to figure out. Like, how do we have better arguments so that we can get stuff done?
I really like that point a lot that you made about better arguments too, because I feel like instead of coming to the table with the expectation that we're going to have something in common, finding ways to get comfortable in the difference. I really like that. Chloe, I think you had your hand up. Did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Veronica. Hi, Laura. My name is Chloe. I'm a senior at Florida International University studying international relations. And I became very interested in the Democracy Fund after seeing that you all were offering like a internship program for the spring. And I look forward to applying as more opportunities open up. But I really admire how you distinguish this idea of diversity, you know, versus inclusion. I think inclusion, you know, that brings up this idea of equity. Yes, like that we have the variation of colors, but can all the colors make it onto the palette? I'm an artist, so I naturally go to that. However, I'm curious, do you have any grantees in your portfolio that address the barriers that still linger with Amendment 4 in the state of Florida, where convicted felons have the possibility to be able to vote as long as they like wait a certain amount of years and take care of their fines? Do you know of any organizations that help those individuals get relieved of those fines so they can actually participate in our democracy?
So I don't personally know organizations that are working specifically on that, but I'll sort of say this just more broadly. When I know it's going to feel kind of squishy in the space that I'm in, because we fund organizations that are directly engaged on different parts of where that inequity or structural barriers show up. And they all work in different types of structural barriers. But in that particular one, when I am talking about those experiments around how you sort of figure out inclusive decision-making, that's a really good example for me of how the way that we traditionally think about civic engagement is sometimes skewed, because we always place a lot of the power in voting. So when organizations plan their strategies for outreach, they really look at voter rolls. Like, they are only looking primarily at the list of people that vote. When elected officials are trying to define who they're going to go after, they only care about voters, right? And so you brought up a good example, like of people that are American citizens, and because they are felons, former incarcerated folks, they end up being disenfranchised. And so when we are thinking about what does it actually take to increase trust in our institutions, to increase engagement in our institutions, we need to sort of break that down to take into account the fact that not everybody's a US citizen. Not everybody that lives in a community is able to vote for whatever reason. And yet we have to sort of shift that dynamic to figure out, how do we create spaces to engage them where they're at? That voting is not the end all to it, right? That you have the capacity to engage in town hall meetings, that you can do advocacy, that you can pick up the phone, whether you're a voter or not, and tell your elected official what you think, and that you should be able to walk into their office and give them a proposal for an idea of something that will make your community better. So when I am talking about those broader models of inclusive decision-making, I am talking about, Chloe, what you just mentioned, like, where are the organizations that are really thinking about engaging those folks in building their capacity and their confidence to engage with their government in a healthier way? And that can not only be something that is available to voters in the system. So sorry that doesn't get to, like, I don't know specific organizations, but I'm like, that's sort of the space that I'm in, like, bigger thinking of all of it, like, how do we fix it?
Thank you for your question, Chloe. And I hope it's not overstepping, but I actually have heard that the Florida Justice Center does a little bit of work around that. So if you want to check them out, I know that they're working on that. Melva Pearson, who supports that group, actually helped to create legislation. So I thought maybe you might like that. Sandra, I think you had a question as well.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Sandra Kiplagat. I'm a third-year PhD student in the Department of Epidemiology. And I think kind of going towards Chloe's point, or how you mentioned this, this talk about inclusion. How do we ensure we can foster this inclusion? Like we see with Congress, we've gotten so many women, we've gotten so many people of color into this, into the government, but how do we ensure we can foster inclusion, as you say, these different models? Have you had any examples of this, and what works? What do you feel like works?
Yeah, so I want to be macro and micro so you can see specific examples. So let me kind of put it in the context of Congress itself. The short answer to your question is we need to help people understand what structural barriers look like. And I want to also make a disclaimer that I didn't mention equity when I talked about diversity and inclusion, because equity is in everything, okay? It has to be a lens in the diversity part of it, and it has to be a lens, obviously, in the inclusion part of it. But to increase inclusion, you need more people that are able to see where the barriers are. And so the way that there's a couple of examples. I co-authored, I think Eric mentioned it, a guide for Congress on how to create more inclusive and representative offices. And you can look at the guide in a linear way. So DEI is not linear, but in this case, let's make it linear. How do you increase diversity? There are very specific tactics to do that. You make sure that your resume is getting out to where it has to go. You provide members with tips on how to build bigger coalitions so that their information is getting out there. You do trainings for staff so that they understand how to do interviews with an equity lens. Like you're helping sort of structure things so that they increase diversity in an office. But then you spend all this time hiring diverse people, and then you can't keep them because you're not an inclusive work environment. Because of structural barriers, right? In Congress, structural barriers are huge for everybody because Congress doesn't have an HR office. So every single member of Congress, they decide what they do in their office. And they are people from a lot of different sectors, right? Like they may be doctors or engineers or teachers or, whatever. Like you can run for Congress, you can be whatever. And then they bring political folks usually to lead their offices. And the thing is that the incentives that we provide leadership in Congress are like to get stuff done, right? As constituents, we want them to vote. We want them to pass legislation. Nobody is out here saying, hey, we want you to be a better manager. We want you to understand your unconscious bias. We want you to understand why your story informs how you make decisions. And that permeates what they do with their staff themselves to keep them on board, to grow them, to give them opportunity, to make sure that they are diverse, to make sure that they can bridge with each other. But imagine those staff themselves are not getting access to that kind of leadership development. And therefore, whatever policy change they are recommending also lacks an equity lens, and therefore can also increase barriers. So it affects all of us that they themselves if they themselves don't know in the micro universe of their office how to make it work inclusively, then whatever they're putting out into the world will probably replicate what their office environment is like, right? And so those are some of the places where you want to start to understand, like, what are those things, what are barriers? In other cases, so for example, I also support some work in this month, very appropriately. We have a significant track of work that supports engaging more women to run for office. And some of the things there, like when we're talking about structural barriers, we actually support an organization called Vote Mama Foundation. And Vote Mama is working with state legislatures to make sure that women and candidates in general can use campaign funds for childcare. So Right now, if you run for office, you usually have to quit your job. So you, right, like that's a really big barrier. You can't have your full-time job. So how the hell are you going to pay for your kids? So who is it that has the money to run for office? Like you have to quit your job for however long. And then if you win, you have to spend, when you're in session, even if it's a part-time legislature, you have to take a break of like a month or two to do your legislative duties and then go back to work, right? So who can afford that? And then on top of that, when you're running, you can't even use the money from the campaign to pay to put your kid in childcare. And so that is what Vote Mama is doing. They're really thinking through where are those structural barriers for women so that we can deal with them. And they are structural because they require policy changes. Like we need to change the structure of our government and how it operates and the regulations that it puts out there so that we can fix it, so that we can create an opening that makes it more equitable for women to run or candidates, not only women. I mean, so many candidates, of all genders and affiliations need to have access to these sorts of things so that they can run. So I don't know if that gets exactly at your question, but I'm just trying to provide some of the places where I see energy. And then for all of us who are for all of us that see them, I think it's important when I talk about the tools for sort of navigating that uncomfortability, that is where we have the individual responsibility, because I think right now there's also this wave and this push. There's a lot more people that want to do more. There are a lot more people that, I'm just going to be open and say, that think they are woke and they want to impose, right? Like I want other people to be woke immediately. And it doesn't work like that, because in this space, you have to be inspired individually to want to see. And so just because you see and you want to sort of impose what you're seeing on others, that doesn't work. That is part of what is creating tension in the country right now, that you sort of have to create a space, an open space for people to come in where they are and that their story does inform where they are, right? So what can you do to sort of respectfully create that opening for people to see more of those barriers? Because that is ultimately how we're going to get to a more equitable space, not by saying, oh, well, we're going to be the party of diversity and, all white people, you're not with us. You're just going to go over there and do your thing. Like that doesn't work. Diversity also means that we are white too. We are Black, we are brown, we are white. That is diversity. We are all of it. And we need to hold all of it. And so, and even within Miami is like an awesome example of that. You have all these different communities and this potluck of people. I hate the word melting pot because we don't have to melt into each other. We have to all be each other, how we are. But even within our own communities, like there are these tensions, right? Like I am Cuban, the daughter of Cuban refugees, born in Puerto Rico. And every time I go to Miami, they're like, you sound so Puerto Rican. And I'm like, well, I'm more Cuban than all of you. So, right? Like we have those tensions even within our communities. So how do we hold them? Like, how do we invite more people to want to come in and see? How do we invite our old Cuban grandpa refugees, like we know how stubborn they are, to see those barriers and understand them? Like that's the business I'm in. Like that to me is how we bridge.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's really important, as you mentioned, like understanding how like the lens to apply and make sure it trickles down to policy work. So thank you so much.
Thanks for your question, Sandra.
What would you say is the state of DEI in our democratic institutions, knowing this lens, knowing the work that we have to do?
I think that we're in a good place. So what we have invested primarily in from a systemic point of view, we have invested a lot in what we call movement building. There has been a lot of money put into movement building, which essentially is the advocacy from organizations that represent diversity or want more diversity in the country, to help more people understand why we need it. But that's a pretty big barrier in itself, because what we've been spending money on, if you take a step back, is actually, in my opinion, it's a barrier in itself. We have put all of these minority-led organizations in a bucket where they constantly have to make the case to people that there's racism, but then they never can actually work on dealing with it because they're stuck over here movement building. And I think those movements have evolved a lot. So Black Lives Matter is a good example where it went, right? Like it has gone from raising the volume and making sure that people understand that there are issues and that they exist, to now little by little starting to really help communities sort of see like, okay, so how do we deal with it now, right? Like now that more people are listening to us, there's definitely a lot more awareness than I have seen in other times around inequity and inequality. And that creates an aperture. But there's still dynamics around, we all see things differently. We're human. So even within, if you think, well, all the woke people are on the left, like that's sometimes a problem in itself, because if you think you're too woke, you're not going to be that open to learning. And this is about learning. Like you need to be open to understanding that, like, you may understand what the Latino community or the African-American immigrant community in the United States has to deal with, but that doesn't mean you understand the disability Black community. Like the layers of inequity are so many that you have to create that aperture to have more people with not only an appetite to learn, but to continue learning. Not to say like I'm woke and I'm done and I'm like the biggest supporter here of DEI and shut up because I know everything. Like it doesn't work like that. And you have to also think about it like there are elements of diversity that include political diversity. And you need to also be engaging with that. We are different. That is what pluralism is. So what is great about this moment is that you have more of an appetite from people to learn. But now what is hard about it is that we need to continue to figure out, what do we teach them now that they are hungry for that information? And how do we teach it, right? And how do we create better models to make sure that folks can see clearly? And that is not only one perspective. Again, it's all of the perspectives sort of coming together. So we're a little bit raging there right now because there's a lot of pressure compounded by like the fact that when we talk about polarization, and to me the polarization piece is that belonging piece, like there are many forces that are spending tons of money and creating tons of strategies to divide us, right? Like division makes money when you divide people. Like those things, the drivers for it externally and internally, like for example, for foreign enemies, that is a strategy to divide us, right? And whether it is for social media or not, it is used to divide us. And it serves political ends to do that. And so we are sort of trying to do this DEI work with more people becoming aware and doing all of that. But at the same time, we are facing incredible forces that aim to divide us. So there's that leadership development component. And then there's who is it, right? Like, what's the long-term gain here? When I think about how we fix, I get a lot of people that ask me about different parts of it. Like, well, what social media is trying to divide us, like, what do we do, right? So we spent all this money teaching people about fake news and what it was. And now we're trying to figure out how to teach people what disinformation and misinformation are. We need to inoculate ourselves to division, so that when it comes to us, we individually need to say, no, actually, that is not how it is. I know better, right? When something on social media tells you that your Muslim neighbors are terrorists, that you individually can say like, no, that's not the truth. And not that an advocacy movement has to follow it, right? Like there is not enough money on the planet to combat all of those things that want to divide us. So that's sort of where we are right now, like this huge moment of opportunity to really bridge and become a better country, a more pluralistic country, while having all of these forces pushing really hard for us to go in the opposite direction of that, right? And to not be plural, to be divided on these very issues around identity.
Thank you. I definitely think some of the comments in the chat sort of rounded up how I felt too. So divide and conquer, and we should never be done. So we're never done learning. And then I love the idea of like inoculating ourselves against division. So being able to kind of be the voice of reason almost in these difficult situations where we can say, you know, no, I don't think that's true. So
I would say more than the voice of reason, aim to be the curious voice. You don't need to know everything. That's the whole point. You can't. You should be the voice of curiosity. Ask what better questions you should be asking. What don't I know? That's the place where you start to become really powerful.
thank you. Mada, I think you had a question.
Yes, Veronica, thank you. Hi, Laura, my name is Maeda Mosnet. I'm studying biomedical engineering, and that was a really interesting talk. And it's your job is very respectable, and it's a very hard one to do, I understand. So just to follow up on the previous questions, I have a couple of questions for you. Number one is because you are in such a close contact with all of these dynamics, and we also know that United States is not a sedentary nation. It's very dynamic, and you have to take into account all these parameters that continuously get evolved. And how much, and also, well, I'm an immigrant. I'm not an immigrant yet. I'm an international student. So when you were mentioning that we can still sit on city halls and mention our concerns, despite the fact that we are not US citizens or residents, how much resistance do you see from the US residents and citizens, majority of them, towards this agenda that you want to include the internationals and you want to include someone like that in the decisions, long-term or short-term decisions of this country? And also leading to, based on what the resistance is, what is the timeline for all these implementation of the models that you were mentioning, so that we can, you know, pass this stage and move on to the next stage, which is more based on evolution, and it's like more important that getting this division more together and then moving forward. So
I wish I had the answer to that. I wouldn't be, I mean, I struggle every morning when I wake up and I'm like, I'm supposed to, what is my role here? Like, I don't have the answer on how you fix all of this. And I don't have the answer on the timeline for it. I think
projection, just idea wise, like what would you expect, and what is the, I'm not looking for like an exact thing, but just perception wise, what are we looking at right now in the society?
I think it's happening. I think that more people are trying to figure out how to be inclusive. And that's a good thing. That is moving the needle slowly, but it's moving. And I see it. This is gonna sound like I get too creative, but I see it. I am seeing it everywhere. So I'm gonna give you an example. I was watching, I don't know if you saw on Disney Plus, there's a new movie called Raya. And I was watching it yesterday. And Raya is a movie about bridging and creating inclusive communities. How do you bring together different factions of people who vehemently disagree with each other? That's what the movie is about. That is incredibly powerful, because it means that our elites that are in charge of telling our stories, which is a big part of a healthy democracy, how we tell the joint stories of a nation and what it looks like, are doing it in a healthier way and that are showing that conflict and that difference. So I don't have an answer, because your question is very big. It's a big question and a very good one. But I see elements of hope, and I see change in the places where you wouldn't traditionally expect to see them. So I encourage you to like keep looking at those things, right? Like even at the, you know, when we talk about institutions, we also, most people think we're only talking about Congress or the state legislature or what's happening in Tallahassee, right? Like, no, institutions are FIU. What does this room look like? Who is in this room asking questions? You are. That is power, right? You are involved right now in the conversation of America and what it looks like as an international student with your lens and your story. And that, when you think about where are the places where we come together to make decisions, that doesn't only happen in government. Like, it happens in the student council at FIU, and it happens at the church or the mosque. It happens at the community pool during the summer, right? Like, all of those places where you are interacting with people that are different, you are engaging in power. You are coming up with solutions. You're asking questions. So my answer is, we need more of that. We need healthier institutions, healthier groups to belong to, because we also have seen what happens when we don't purposely create healthier communities of people to belong to. Then we have the January 6th attacks on the Capitol, right? Like, we need to create healthier spaces for people to come together. And that's hard, right? Like, in COVID times, we are like literally separated. And so we're gonna have to do a lot more work to create those healthier spaces, but I think it's possible, and I see it.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Thank you.
I think, Nikki, you had your hand up. Did you still want to ask a question? Okay, perfect. Pop back up. Sorry.
Yes, please. With that being said, I mean, you know, we all know we should be more inclusive and not discriminatory. For example, like if we were to rid all across the board with racism, because that's obviously one of the main issues, because we have so many options, it's always going to be like an opposing view or something that's discriminatory. So for example, we rid everything of racism and we have equality there, or even gender equality, and we have discrimination for social status or income brackets and things like that. And so what do you suggest for like that dynamic, or, you know, because of the options or the opposing view? Because it doesn't have to be a mass of people, because we can have majority of people in favor of something, but just a little inkling of something can still cause enough ruckus to keep that division.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the answer to me, and that's right, like that is why this space is so hard, but part of it is helping others see structural barriers, because a lot of, you mentioned, you just did a list of structural barriers right there, just talking. Those barriers, they affect the Black and brown communities, but they also affect low-income white Americans in many different ways, right? And so we need to, when we talk about structural barriers, like we need to put it in context on why it is a structural barrier for who and why, and to expand sort of that pool, because they are affecting negatively a lot of people, not a lot of people of a lot of different colors and races and backgrounds. So I think that's one part of it. I think, listen, to be honest, also, I think that if you put it in red and blue, in a red and blue dynamic, it's not all the reds that have the issue, right? The Republicans are raging a little bit because there is and I actually don't like to talk about it as Republicans. I would say more like white anxious Americans. So America is diverse. Like, we're already diverse. And so a lot of people are just realizing that, and they don't quite know what it means for them. And there are communities, many communities, America is very big, that do not look like Miami. Like, they don't need to look like all of America because their constituents are all white. That doesn't mean that they're not different from each other, right? Like in that space, you also have diversity, and you have inequity also in those spaces, whether it's because of income, whether it's because of, you know, veterans, like disabilities, like all of those different layers of it. And so when I think it's well-intentioned from one side to say, like, we're the party of diversity, we're the ones that understand it. And so like, we're pushing and pushing, but we also need to be aware that it's very fast for some people and it feels aggressive. It feels like a bulldozer. It's like all over the place. You turn on, we talked about storytelling and narratives. You turn on Netflix, it's all there, right? All of a sudden, homosexuality is everywhere, right? And so for those people, that's like, oh my God, like what is going on? And so that is the space where I'm like, it is not that you stop combating racism to take care of those people. You keep pushing, but you also need to create a space of grace to help them come on board with it. And so I think I actually think in the last 4 years, I have seen more of an appetite to do that. And I'll tell you an example. 6 years ago, in the first Black Lives Matter movement, it was very like, this is racist, we're just gonna go, we're gonna push. In this round, you are seeing a lot more around how do you come into my space? Like if you look at the memes on BLM, there's like specific things and explanations of what things are. What is unconscious bias? What does it mean to be an anti-racist? And like clearly describing that. And those are the places where you bring people in, because on the other end, if it's just advocacy, you're wrong. And this, we need to combat racism and you need to like just step away because you have white privilege. That was creating a lot of that tension. And from a more technical aspect, because I do a lot of DEI, just individual, like I do DEI. I don't agree, for example, with trainings that begin with white privilege. Like, I think that they disempower people when they're just coming into the pot, right? Like, to me, it is healthy that people are sitting at an unconscious bias training or a training on DEI. That is awesome, right? And I want to create a brave space for them. But if I started out by telling them that they're responsible for something that they feel they cannot change, then that to me creates anxiety and tension and division. And I want to create a space where they want to be curious about how their whiteness affects how America behaves, right? Or what they do in a space. So I don't know that that answers your question, because again, you all have really awesome and big, meaty questions. But those are sort of the tactics of where I would like bring it down when I'm thinking about a space that I am creating. And I think for you all, right, like that is where you have power. What is the space that you create with your friends? What is the space that you create in a classroom to bring more people into your journey, but also for you to go into theirs?
Yeah, it did answer the question. It's just crazy because a lot of people are just so oblivious. Like, for example, like, and if you look at the celebrity realm, like, I can take, for example, like Lil Wayne was like, well, and you know, he's African-American or Black. And he's like, well, I'm rich, or this doesn't impact me. So that's when I started looking at it beyond the color of our skin and like, okay, he doesn't understand the discriminatory factor of not just how you look, but then your social status. Because you feel you made it, or you're getting certain attention or a certain level of privilege, but you're not getting it because of necessarily your complexion. You're getting it because your notoriety or your income bracket. So it's still impacting you. It doesn't matter if I'm dealing with it for color purposes or someone else is dealing with it because they're a woman or because he's a guy. It's still discriminatory. And we're trying to have education for inclusion or respecting each other's difference, but still have equality. And I think that's where people miss it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think Laura will be our last question.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Hi, Laura. I am Laura. I'm studying political science at FIU with certificates in human rights and national security. I wanted to ask more about your career path and how did you get into this type of advocacy work? Like if there was a moment that you decided, okay, this is a path for me. And I also wanted to ask about the different works to create a more welcoming environment in male-dominated fields like the intelligence community, besides the recruitment process. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Absolutely. That's a great question. Great questions. And I have answers for you. So I like this one better because I actually have answers that you can take and go. The others are like, I'm sorry, democracy's in turmoil. But so I actually got to DC with a paid internship. My mom found out that the government of Puerto Rico had a paid internship program and they sent interns to DC and they paid everything because my mom is a teacher, my dad's an agronomer, and I would have never been able to afford coming to DC unpaid. So when I got here, I ended up working with the congressman from Puerto Rico at the time, who was a Republican. Puerto Rico politics are different. In the island, Republican or Democrat doesn't mean anything because we align around statehood parties. Obviously, my parents are Cuban, so they did have sort of a Republican background, but they really wanted me to work with Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, which I ultimately, that's a different story. She's awesome. So I was a poli-sci student like you, and I thought at the time that I was gonna study law because that's what all poli-sci people think they're gonna do afterwards. And when I came to do my internship, I still had a semester left over. So I went back home and my mom was like, where are you gonna work? What are you gonna do? I'm like, I'm gonna work in DC. And she's like, but you don't have a job. I'm like, I don't care. That's what I'm doing. I'm gonna work in DC. I'm gonna get a job. So by the time that my internship was my semester after my internship was almost over, the congressman's office called me and offered me a job. And so I came back to DC as a staff assistant and I went up the ranks in that office. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I don't need to be a lawyer because to work in Congress and to be an advocate, you can be anything. In fact, we need people from all different backgrounds because Congress is making decisions on all sorts of different things, right? So I think, Sandra said she was an epidemiologist, like, oh my God, how many decisions are we making right now? And where we need expert guidance and advice. Where the Department of Transportation is deciding all these things around, infrastructure, like we need engineers to come in and help with that. So we need every sort of background. And at that point, I decided I was going to do a master's degree. And I did my master's in international commerce and policy. And so I've been going up the ranks in different places, and I've done a lot of advocacy and lobbying and building advocacy strategies across issues. I've worked on voting rights. I've worked on census nationalization. I worked on bringing more federal funds to FIU. So that's sort of how I fell into it. And what I would say to you is there are a lot of opportunities in different spaces in DC to bring sort of every background. On the national security space, it's actually a really big priority because yes, they are male dominated, they are very white spaces, and we are trying to figure out how do we create more consistent pipelines. One answer to that is the fact that there's a pretty strong push right now to provide paid internships at the Department of State, because the Department of State is really not diverse. And part of it is that they don't have paid internships and they don't partner with a lot of organizations that do provide paid internships, like HACU, for example. I don't know if you've heard of HACU, but I know FIU works really closely because that's where I used to work with them. But you wouldn't be able to get a HACU internship at the Department of State. You would be able to get a HACU internship at the Census Bureau. And in fact, when you look at the Census Bureau, it looks like us because of those pipelines. I know that the Biden administration also has made this a big priority. And I know that because I know a very awesome young woman that is going to be leading their legislative affairs at the National Security Council. And this is her passion project. She wants to get more diverse folks into national security roles and international roles. So I would say, if that is what you want to do, shoot me an email. I'll make sure that you're plugged into the right people in those spaces that are working really hard to make it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll get on it.
Thank you so much, Laura. This was so informative and so awesome, and I really appreciate getting your perspective, and I know the team probably does too. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I loved listening to your questions, and hopefully you're not leaving this conversation without hope. I hope I conveyed hope. I don't want you to be freaking out.
No, you were fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you,
Thanks.
Veronica, for being a great moderator for our first session of the program. That was a really informative. I learned a lot. I took a lot of notes. So thank you so much for your time this morning.
Anytime. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Have a great day. Stay
You
safe.
too. Bye.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're excited to welcome our next speaker. Ms. Karyne Jones has entered our room. So good morning, Karyne. I'm Carrie Montgomery Orozco. I'm the Director of Campus Life here at FIU. I'm Eric's colleague down in Miami. We're very grateful to have you with us this morning.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm going to just jump right off. Going to share a little bit your bio and then just jump right in with questions if that's okay. And then we'll field some questions from our group.
It's fine.
Let me get that opened up. Okay, so Karyne Jones is President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Caucus and Center on Black Aging, Inc. During its 50-year history, NCBA has been the only national organization devoted solely to providing effective leadership in making minority participation in aging services a national issue and priority. Prior to becoming NCBA's Chief Executive Officer, Karyne was Executive Director of Federal Relations with SBC Telecommunications, Inc., now AT&T, based in Washington, D.C., where she lobbied members of Congress on telecommunications issues and policies. Karyne's previous Capitol Hill experience includes legislative aid to Congressman Andrew Young. During his tenure as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, she became his Public Affairs Officer and White House liaison. A native of San Antonio, she returned to Texas and began her own political career. Karyne served for 8 years in the Texas legislature, representing District 120 in San Antonio. During her tenure, she served on the Appropriations, State Federal Relations, Corrections, and Urban Affairs committees. She also served as Vice Chair of the House Democratic Caucus and was a member of the Black and Mexican American Legislative Caucuses. Prior to her election to the Texas House of Representatives, she was elected twice to the school board of the East Central Independent School District. Karyne is a graduate of Clark Atlanta University, where she received her bachelor's degree in political science, and Northern Illinois University with a master's degree in public affairs. She earned a second master's degree in public administration from Harvard University. She currently serves on the National Board of Directors of the Alzheimer's Association, Generations United, Leading Age, and immediate past chair of the Board of the American Society on Aging, becoming the first African-American female to lead the National Professional Aging Organization. She's also a current member and past board member of the Washington Government Relations Group. Whew, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, sounds like I couldn't keep a job.
Sounds like you were restless and wanted to do more to me. So thank you so much, Karyne, for finding time for us in your extraordinarily busy schedule. I am going to just jump right in with a question about your current role. And if you could share some of the policy priorities for NCBA and how you determine and act on those priorities.
Well, thank you very much. And let me just say, first of all, that I just give you a quick background of NCBA, because most people have not heard of it. And particularly if you're young, you've never heard of it. NCBA was founded 51 years ago by African-American nursing home professionals who felt like that the voice of African-American seniors was being left out when they were creating the Older Americans Act. And so they were able to get together. They were able to get a meeting with President Nixon at the time. And Nixon did appoint our founder, Hobart Jackson, to the commission that was deciding on what would happen with the Older Americans Act. And at that time, they just really made sure that there were policies and funding mechanisms that went directly to communities of color. So after they were successful in working that, they said, wait, we probably need to make this an organization. And so that's how Ncba was founded. And we've come a long way since then, because we were first just an advocacy organization. And we've now, we continue our advocacy, but we also provide programs and services. We do training and employment for low-income seniors. We build, we own, and we manage, and we help other nonprofits do senior affordable housing. And we also do health and wellness programs. And then, of course, a big part of what we do is the advocacy, mostly on Capitol Hill, but we do reach out to state and local organizations when it's an aging issue that's affected. So that, just giving that little background on Ncba, that tells you who we are. And we are based in Washington. We do serve 15 different states. As a matter of fact, I have 2 offices in Florida, one in Jacksonville and another one in near Panama City. So, so we do have a footprint there. When it comes to policy, it's always interesting when I'm asked this question about Ncba, because in reality, we pretty much just fine tune our policy, because we're still seeking the same thing we were, unfortunately, 50 years ago. And that's equity and access to not only services and program, but just fairness in terms of employment, in terms of housing, in terms of environment, in terms of just treating people regardless of color or race, ethnicity, but treating people as they age in dignity. So along the way, you know, our focus and our mission has been, again, to improve the quality of life of older Americans, particularly low-income Americans. But we just kind of fine tune each policy depending on what the issue is. But it's still the same from when we got started. And so right now, over this past year, initially, we were very concerned about the distrust of many in the communities of color of taking the vaccine, even though we knew we were disproportionately dying from the virus. And so we worked on with different partners and tried to change that perception, tried to educate as many people as possible. We reached as many trusted leaders in local communities as we could to give them the facts, to try to change and try to encourage people to take the vaccine. And it's so interesting as we moved into September and October. It wasn't so much distrust now as I can't get the access. I can't access the computer. I can't get the appointment. Where do I go? And so that's what we're working on now, is just the equity and the access to the vaccine. So our policy then, as I said, always just gets tweaked a little bit depending on what the current issue is, but it all is the same thing: fairness, equity, access.
I'm curious, you actually answered what was going to be my follow-up question, was how has this year of COVID impacted your work and your priority focus? But I'm also curious to know, and I'm sorry, this wasn't one of the questions that we had given you in advance, but I want to know how the Black Lives Matter movement maybe has impacted any of your work, and how you're approaching, you know, the advocacy work in general.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this last year, 2020, was an unusual year for everybody, but it particularly was interesting for us because we knew that there was a new election coming up, and we knew that we had to make sure that the priorities for our communities were on the agenda for all candidates, whether they were running for president or whether they were running for dog catcher. We just made sure that everybody understood the priorities and the needs for our issues. And that's how we usually prepare during election time, just to get the information out. But with the Black Lives Matter, again, it so parallels what we do anyway. So we were very supportive of the movement. I know that when you looked out in the crowd, sometimes you saw a lot of young people, which was very encouraging. But there were spatters of older persons there who remember where we were in the 60s, what we had, how we may have come to the 70s, what happened in the 80s. And they brought that sort of institutional knowledge and history and experience to work with younger people who are seeking the exact same thing we've been, dealing with forever. Police brutality is not limited to young Black males. It's something that's experienced by just about anyone of color. And so we were very, very supportive of that. In terms of the virus itself, as I said, we were, so disproportionately affected, and particularly older people of color. It was, devastating for us. And so we knew we had to do something. And so again, we partnered we actually worked with an organization. We formed a coalition. We call it the COVID Vaccine Project, Equity Project. And I partnered with Healthy Women and with the Alliance for Aging Research. And the three of us as CEOs, we all got together. We talked about the distrust factor, how we want to address it, how we want to work. We never sought out to be the voice of any organization or people. We wanted to give voice and empowerment to the people so that they would feel comfortable in the decision that they had to make in terms of taking the vaccine. And we were able to recruit over 150 other organizations to join in with us. So with that organizing, we were able to reach different networks that we probably had not reached before. And so everybody, every organization has its constituency. It was great to then be able to bring so many partnerships and so many organizations together. So we think we've been impactful. And we think as a result of that, people now want to take the vaccine. They're looking to take the vaccine. If there's any light to the whole COVID-19 process, it shined a light on, again, what we've been dealing with as an organization for the last 50 years. It showed what we've been telling you about health inequity. We've been telling you about lack of access to health care. We've been telling you that how when you're unemployed or when you have low employment, when you don't have good housing, clean, safe environments, when you don't have food deserts, all of those things impact the health of people. So when a catastrophic virus comes through, those are the first people that are affected. And so it's almost like, okay, well, we've been telling you this, we've been marching for it, we've given you all the data, policymakers agree, yet nothing has been moved, they don't move the needle enough. I think people have heard it now because it had such an economic impact on our country. So I think we'll begin to see some movements. You don't even hear people anymore saying that they hate Obamacare. If some of those people hadn't had Obamacare, they would not have had access to any kind of healthcare. So we're moving along. Again, the needle moves too slow, but at least again, the last year with the attention brought on by Black Lives Matter and also the virus itself, I think we'll begin hopefully to see some changes. And I always say everywhere I go that when you don't have a healthy society, you don't have a productive society. And we all want to have a productive society where people are doing well. Everybody doesn't want to be a billionaire. They just want enough to be able to take care of their families, to be able to see a doctor when they're sick, to be able to live in a safe and clean neighborhood, the basics. Yeah. And if we can just work to provide that and help people out, I think we'll have a better society.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like such a revolutionary concept.
No,
really.
No. It just goes to our own humanity.
Yes.
And when we can say that when somebody else is doing well, that's good, because that means that all comes back exactly well. So we've got to get the concept of we're not going to leave these people out, or we're only going to help these people. When all humanity does well, all human beings do well, everybody does well. You can stay rich. It has nothing to do with if a poor person gets a little assistance with food,
Exactly.
So it's real simple.
So I'm curious about how your background as an elected official in a few roles,
Mhm.
as well as working for other elected officials, has informed your strategy, your advocacy strategy in your current role.
Well, I am really very lucky. Both of my parents were very involved in the community. And, we're talking way back in the 60s and 70s. They were always, my father was very involved. He was really dedicated to a orphanage, which they used to have at that time, and used to make us go over there and volunteer and do things. And we were just raised in a house that you had to, it wasn't about you, it's about what you can do. And same with my mother. My God, she's been on every board and everything. I'm from San Antonio, everywhere. So I kind of had that already instilled in me. And then when I went away to college in Atlanta, one of the first person I met was Andy Young. And he was running for Congress at that time. Every time I hear his name in my bio, I said, ooh, that really dates me, because a lot of these people probably don't even know who Andy Young is. But he was one of Martin Luther King's lieutenants, as they say. And so he was running for Congress, and I worked in his campaign. And it was probably the first time, because growing up in San Antonio was not the hub of the civil rights movement. But once I got to Atlanta, it was a totally different thing. And we sort of kind of moved past the initial struggle that people were moving in. We started having more Black mayors. We saw more people doing business, and it seemed like we were moving more towards equity in society. And I got the privilege of meeting a lot of those civil rights workers whose names we'll never know, but were participants in change, and to hear their stories and to hear about their advocacy and their commitment and how they did things. And all I remember hearing a lot of is never cross a picket line. And you always have to stay nonviolent. I mean, it was a history lesson and a lesson in moving forward. So working for, and I always encourage young people, I think one of the best jobs you can get, even if it's an internship, is to work with a public official at any level, because you can really then understand the process, and you understand that, we expect people that we elect because they promise us everything. And I was one of those. They promise us everything when they're running. But in reality, once you get in office, there is a myriad of issues, and you're not an expert in all of them, and so you're having to have to deal with all of those. And so it may look like your cause isn't important to them, but that's not it. It may not be the cause that they have to deal with in front of them. So you learn a lot. And so I encourage people to do internships. And if they're not going to do it with the public official, work in a campaign, because you really will learn the structure of how politics works, and it's all politics. So I learned a lot in that way, and then had the experience of working working on the Hill. I was still working for him in Congressman Young at that time in Washington. Learned an awful lot about the legislative process, and then when he went to New York to become UN ambassador, he took me along there, and then working on an international scale, which was, I had no international background, but once you get into it, it was nothing for me to talk about Namibia and Zimbabwe. And I'd never heard of those things coming from San Antonio. Matter of fact, I don't think I even pronounced Zimbabwe right when I first got there. So you just learn to take advantage of those opportunities. And that's what I did. And I just learned so much from them. And so as a result, when I decided to run for office, the one thing I do also remember is listening was my greatest communication skill. I didn't have all the answers. And so therefore, when someone came to talk to me, it wasn't about somebody, I'm looking down because I'm the person that's in office. No, it was a matter of you're coming to me with an issue that's important and I need to listen. Now, once you hear that, I'd always ask, now, what are the pros and cons? Because right after you leave, somebody's going to come in and give me the other side. So I always tried to weigh the better benefits, and the pros and the cons of each issue. And those are things, again, that I learned just in that process. I enjoyed public office. I just wanted to do something else. And after I'd been on the school board for 4 years, and then I'd served in the in legislature in Texas, and that in itself is a whole nother book. Because I served under Ann Richards and George Bush. So it was, night and day. And so, but it was a great learning thing. And then decided I wanted to do something else, and was offered a position as a lobbyist in Washington. And I said, well, this is the time. And I just took advantage of it. And so, you take advantage of opportunities and you move forward. And that's how I got to Washington and did that. And again, learned a lot, because when you're going and meeting with members of Congress, they represent constituencies that are different. People from Wyoming don't think the same way as folks from Louisiana. And so you have to respect their interests and who they're representing, and just try to bring the best information forward so they'll make a decision, hopefully, in the way that you'd like them to. So it's been a great experience, and prepared me then to become a CEO of an organization that has to deal with everybody on everything. So, and I've been CEO now 18 years. Can't imagine that I've been here, but longest job I've ever had. So
you started your professional life at like age 13, 14, something?
Yes, take it back even further, make me younger.
I was thinking 12, but I thought there are laws against that.
That's right.
All right, I see that there are a couple of hands raised, so I'm going to let some of our participants ask some questions and see if I get back to my list. But Chloe,
Okay.
you raised?
Yes. Hi, Ms. Jones. My name is
Hi.
Chloe. I'm a senior studying international relations, and I'm actually currently in the middle of a congressional internship at the moment. So I really enjoyed you reaching back and sharing your journey to where you are today. But specifically in this opportunity, I'm able to listen in and take a lot of constituent calls that come from a lot of the elderly in the South Florida community. And it's very disheartening, to hear their concerns, and then to also acknowledge the lack of resources or the inefficiency in the resources that I'm told to refer them to. With the National Caucus on Black Aging, for instance, be familiar with assisting the elderly and achieving their retirement. I realize a lot of people, whether it be through cancer or getting injured on the job, have had these gaps that have allotted them from receiving that supplication.
We, because we primarily focus on low income seniors, most of them don't have retirements or pensions or 401ks or what have you. So we don't really, people we deal with barely have Social Security, simply because they didn't work in the quarters. Most of them have worked in positions where they were just kind of paid at the end of the week in cash. It was enough to sustain themselves or their families or what have you. But then when they got older and they, tried to retire, or for whatever health reasons came up, it was very difficult. So we've not done a lot, but we have done, workshops and services and stuff on financial resources. The only thing I can tell you is that when we get a call from somebody who's concerned about those things, we do have an organization there in Washington, and for some reason the name is slipping me right now, that we refer them to, and we've always asked, when we make a referral, we just give you a number and you go away, and hopefully that person will respond to you. We actually have names of people to call that will follow up on finding out what their answer is. And Wiser is one of the organizations we work with, which is Women Income. I don't know what the acronym is, but it is where they really are concerned about women and their retirement, because we're living longer. We're the ones who take off from work to do the caregiving, lose quarters, and getting Social Security. Very hard to get back into the workforce. And so we've really done a lot of things with the Wiser organization to help people in their resource services. But we find that a lot of people who are eligible for a lot of programs don't know and don't take advantage of them. So if you want to talk like offline or something, and I can probably give you more resources. For some reason, all the names are leaving me right now, but there are organizations who actually function and work to assist people when they get into these kinds of crises. Now, COVID has created a whole nother group of people now who have found themselves, in poverty, really. Hopefully this stimulus package that was just passed will come through and help a few of them, but that's not a long-term process. And so I think our jobs are really going to amp up. Older people are different now than they were even 20 years ago. 60 and 70-year-olds are still working. And back in those days, that's where Social Security was set up. They thought everybody would retire by 60, they'd be dead by 65, and the money, that's not the way it is. We have people now working into their 90s, and not always because they want to, but because they have to. So there are a whole lot of financial parts of it. I would love to be able to share that with you and give you maybe some advice on how you can help people when they make these kind of inquiries, because when they're calling their member of Congress, they're desperate. And so they need some resources, and you don't want to just give them a phone number and send them off into the blue. You really want to be able to say, call this person at this organization. They should be able to give you some guidance. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones. I look forward to following up with you on that. Thank you.
Oh, please do. Please do.
Sandra, I think you had your hand raised next.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Jones. My name is Sandra. I'm a third-year PhD student in epidemiology. I had a two-part question. How can we distinguish right now? We've talked about the Black Lives Matter movement. How do we distinguish it's not a one-time moment? Because we've also seen a shift in the government, and now we see that the Biden-Harris administration is actually being intentional with this. How do we ensure that this would just not let's give people of color this type of initiatives and just check,
Yeah.
And then I was thinking now there's this discussion about the Black Maternal Health Caucus. Does the Ncba work with that? Thank you.
So on your first question, I don't believe that Black Lives Matter is just this is what we're doing right now. I think it's a movement and will be a revolution. I think because they're not there's not a headquarters and then you got chapters and all that, let's say the NAACP. No, it's a movement. It's a philosophy. It's a change. And the president has already said that equity was going to be a major priority of his. And I believe he's going to stick to that. And we're going to see, I can see it now in some of the directives that have come to some of the federal programs my organization has done. They're not requiring us to not only demonstrate, to show and that we've served so many people and everything, but they want to make sure that my materials are in Spanish, that I'm reaching other communities we may not already have. So the onus is not just on traditionally white organizations, it's on all of us to be fair and equitable and, and moving ahead. So I don't think it's a revolution, but on that point, if you want to know how we keep it going and it doesn't become something that just goes by the wayside, we got to make sure people vote. We got to make sure that people stay active in the electoral system. When I was growing up, we all had to take civics and government so that we understood the role between what city government does and what the federal government does and how a bill is passed and all those things. They don't teach that anymore. So people don't have that sense of understanding. And they were voting now more on personalities rather than on what the real issues are. And that's not the fault of the people. That's the fault of, and I'm not blaming the education system because the education system is run by the politicians. I'm blaming those of us who have not invested enough to make sure that we put people in office who are looking out to make sure that we have an informed constituency, that we have informed public, because people just don't know. You know, I remember when I was a state official, people would call me up and tell me that their trash hadn't been picked up. Well, the state people don't handle your trash pickup. That's a local issue. Or I'd have somebody telling me they didn't get their Social Security check. Well, I'm a state official. That's a federal issue. You know, so I'm just saying, I don't blame them. It's just that we don't teach government how it works, what the process is. And I think if we would focus now, even, we could have a much more educated electorate, and we'd see the kind of changes that we hope we'll see. We're not going to be able to change the heart and mind of a lot of people. People are born and they're in environments that tell them certain things about other people. And that's just, it's an implicit bias that some of them come with. And then some people make it more explicit, but it's, you know, we all have those, and that's not just, all of us have implicit biases. But that's what we've got to work on if we're going to have a society that works. And then on your second one, what was your second one?
I was just wondering if there is partnership with the Black Maternal Health Caucus.
Oh, yes. Well, one of the things that Ncba has done now, and is part of our policy, is that we are becoming a lot more intergenerational, because we recognize that you can't wait until somebody gets older and start telling them, now you got to exercise, you got to eat, you got to save your money, you got to do that. So we want to make sure that when you're young, that you understand that a part of the aging process is you got to prepare now, so that when you get to be an older person, these things are in place, that you live healthier, that you have enough resources in retirement, that you're still a productive and contributing person. So we're doing a lot of intergenerational connections with different organizations. One of them is that we do work with the March of Dimes, who is really very concerned about maternal, particularly the large number of deaths of women of color with their children and themselves. And so, you know, how do we do that? How do we then, well, mothers and grandmothers and aunts that are around can maybe assist in that process. And those are usually people that have worked with some of our other programs. So we're sharing information with them to try to help in that process. It really all goes back to health equity, access, and people knowing that they can go and get the kind of prenatal care they have. So, you know, it all really comes together if we're going to tackle that, but it all, again, goes back to equity and access. So we're working on it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's really interesting. I love that like lifespan approach, because you work with this particular organization, but the interconnection to all phases of life is really important. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Maureen, I think you had your hand up next.
How's my audio working?
Good.
Oh, yay. Okay. I was having issues earlier. So hello, Karyne. I'm Maureen.
Hi.
And I'm a PhD candidate in the history department. So my question to you is, I'll start with a comment. I think our society tends to brush older people under the rug. You know, they just they don't want to see them, you know? So I've been hearing about policies where older people live in intentional multi-generational housing. And this way it really elevates the status of seniors. So is there, you know, have you heard about anything like this? And okay, so can you please talk about that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one of the things, I'm getting the feedback, so you might want to mute your thing. One of the things that Ncba does is we own, manage, and help other nonprofits develop senior affordable housing. And right now, all of ours are exclusively senior, because they get support from HUD, and HUD only requires you have to be 65 and older to live in these facilities. But one of the things we've helped to develop is grand family housing, because we know, particularly after the real opioid crisis, we saw more grandparents having to assume the responsibility of their grandchildren. And then that meant they weren't eligible to stay in places that were designated as senior housing. So that created, so when you create a grand family thing, that changes the entire dynamics of what housing is, because you got children and older people together. There was one place that we talked to them, they had to think about a playground, and they hadn't ever had to think about that with seniors. And we encouraged them not only to think about the playground so the children could play, but maybe put some of those senior activities that the seniors could exercise while the kids played or something like that. So that's the whole thing. The other thing that we've been working with, and I just did an interview a couple of months ago with the New York Times on the Golden Girl concept, where we're seeing more, of course, women live longer than men, and that statistic still hasn't changed. But we're finding that just affordability in terms of housing, it doesn't make sense for you to live in your $500,000 and then she lived there. When you could come together, it addresses so many issues, not only financial, but in terms of kind of working on getting rid of isolation, someone else there to care for you, and so they're all, and then most cities who have gained the aging friendly status, that's something, the United Nations started some time ago, where you could be designated as an age friendly city. They have been working on that whole intergenerational thing, because they recognize that when you, and I must tell you, I'm not a big fan of senior centers, because I think that does take you away from younger people. I think there can be a center where everybody has an activity, you can run into different things, but that's a whole nother subject. But these age-friendly cities have worked very hard to make it intergenerational. So when you, and that means that they work with developers to ensure that maybe there is a floor that's designated disability or what have you, or there is a floor that maybe be designated just for seniors, but that everybody can live within that. And then you encourage the management then to provide opportunities where they can interact. You're right about sometimes, we work very hard on ageism issues. We see a lot of it in employment. Because people think, well, they don't, they're stuck in their ways. They don't want to learn how to work the computer, but that is just simply not true. You have to remember that computers now have been out for the last 20 years, and most of these people had to learn computers on their jobs. So it's not like you've got a whole bunch of people now who don't, everybody has a smartphone almost. Even if you know how to work everything, you do have one. And so, we're seeing a change in that. And again, because people are working longer, they're more still in the workforce, they're still more involved. We have more and more organizations like AmeriCorps, who has, Senior Corps, who are really getting seniors who come out of different professions to do more volunteering and to have that exchange, which I'm on the board of Generations United. Generations United is doing just that. They are focused on bringing youth. We don't want us arguing over whether we're going to put money in education and youth programs versus senior and programs. No, some way those have to be meshed, because young people can learn so much from older people, and older people need that youth to keep feeling like they're producing something. So there are a lot of efforts I know going on in Washington that are reaching out to different things, and we got to stop looking at older people as a burden. We always, when we think of that, oh, Social Security is going to run out, it won't be there when I'm there. Oh, Medicare costs so much, and all those kind of things. Has nothing to do with that. If you invest in young people when they're young and their health, you don't have the burden of high healthcare costs when people get older. If people have access to healthcare when they're young, you don't have to do all. It's the same thing. If you invest in people being educated now, You won't have people that have to depend on poverty programs. You know, it blows my mind, you don't get it, you know, but we're working on that and we will all continue to work on that. So I hope I answered that for you.
Oh, absolutely. You brought up so many relevant points. And as the elder in this group, I thank you for doing such important work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just noting in the comments that what you were just talking about reminded me of a movie from a couple years ago, The Intern, with Rob.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was such a great movie and such a great concept. So I'm glad to hear that that's not just a movie idea and that's something that's really.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
All right, who was next? I think Melanie, I think you had your hand up next.
Hello, Miss Jones. How are you today?
Melanie.
I'm a religious studies student, but I'm really interested in working from the religious perspective in international law and human rights. So that's the path I'm going to. But I had a question. You mentioned briefly that you work with a lot of people that have not paid into, like, haven't paid enough in Social Security. Do you see like a gender gap in that? Is it more women that happens to? Because, you know, some women, especially back in the day, would decide to stay home and raise kids. So are they the ones that have been suffering and not paying enough in Social Security?
Absolutely. We see more of a disparity with women than we do with men. And it's even happening today. There might be some woman that is working, and if anything happens to another family member, what have you, they assume the caregiving role, which takes them out of the workforce, and they lose those quarters, and where they may not even have gained enough to get any kind of substantial payment if they do, you know, draw upon it later. And, you know, yes, so you do see a lot of that. And then, believe it or not, there's still discrimination in women's pay. So you can be working a big corporate job or what have you, but Bill still might make more, which means he can put more into his 401k than you can put in. So, you know, there's a whole equity issue in terms of still pay for women. And the other thing I've got to tell you, I know you think I'm just all over the place, but I'm working with an organization right now. Well, it's not an organization, it's really just a group of people who are working on divorce issues. And they're finding that when people divorce, that women who may not have worked or stayed home or what have you are not getting the benefit of equal retirement from the husband's retirement from his job. And so the laws have to be changed to adjust to that. So there's a group of people, a lot of, I don't call them feminists, they're just women looking for equal, you know, rights, who are getting together. And I've been a part of those meetings just to share that can be a problem, particularly for women from the military, whose husbands were military, people, again, who are in corporate. It's a real disparity and on how, you know, when they do divorce, how that's distributed. And if you've been staying home with the kids and then all of a sudden there's a divorce involved and he gets to walk away with his full retirement and you're just kind of left, or 50 years old, having to go out and work and start just now building the unfairness of that. And every judiciary doesn't treat it fairly. So they're trying to come up with federal legislation to address that. So yeah, we still have a lot of work to go with equity and pay to women, and also equity in how retirement and Social Security and all of those things are done. But women really have the biggest brunt of unfairness in those processes. So you got to get to work.
Yeah, a little follow-up question with everything you mentioned. So would you say that policy change would be the best way to support these women that, let's say, can't pay into Social Security or haven't paid into Social Security?
Oh, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, there's several bills right now, and they come up almost every year, but several bills to look at paying caregivers, you know, providing them with some sort of subsidy, because they actually help the system, you know, by staying home and taking care of somebody, that keeps that person out of having to go into a nursing home and the expense of that. And most of the time, you know, people are eligible, Medicare and Medicaid kick in then. And so that's a real drain on the system. So if somebody's keeping somebody at home and taking care of them, that's less money that, you know, governments have to put out. So they're looking at some way then to, if you're going to be a caregiver, maybe you can be designated as one and you can still maybe accumulate some quarters in your Social Security. There are all kinds of bills trying to address those gaps that people face. So, I mean, if you just probably Google that, all kinds of stuff will come up, because we are recognizing that caregiving is a big part of why women, and you know, some men, but mostly it falls on women, are finding themselves pretty much in poverty as they get older and they retire.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Great questions, everybody. Okay, I think Jennifer, you have your hands up.
Hi, thank you for being here. I had a question. We are living in a pandemic at the moment, and we're trying to get in the process of getting people vaccinated, especially senior citizens. But one of the issues that I've seen in Miami is the fact that we speak so many languages, and the fact that all the information for vaccinations are given out in social media, such as Twitter and Instagram. And a lot of people that are senior citizens don't have Instagram or Twitter. So how can we advocate in the local government as constituents advocate for senior citizens and spread this information?
So what we've done is we stopped trying. We know our folks on Twitter and Instagram and some on Facebook, but not to that extent. And we already know that navigating that appointment system, going online and that just has not worked, particularly for older people. So what we did is we've been contacting local churches and local senior citizen organizations to get them to partner with CVS or what have you, and offer their places of locations as a site for, because we know seniors go to church, we know seniors go to senior citizens centers, the places where we know that seniors will get their information, we get them to offer up their sites as a place where they can distribute the vaccine, also the testing. And we found that that's the best way to reach as many older people as possible, particularly in the African American community. Our success rate has come as a result of going to church. And some of these mega churches are open. They've got gymnasiums and big, you know, community spaces. It's perfect for allowing for, you know, not only, again, the testing, but also distributing the vaccine. And so my suggestion to you is that depending, you know, language is obviously one of the greatest barriers on a lot of things, but I can assure you that no matter what language you speak, you are affiliated with some church or some organization or something like that. You just have to get their leadership to be in touch with the people who are controlling the vaccine. And trust me, that's the issue that they're saying, is they don't have enough locations, or they don't, you know how to bring it to the people or what have you. You offer it up, they'll be able to then work to have it where it's accessible to people. And hopefully they may not have people there who speak a certain language or dialect or what have you, but that's then the people that work there who have offered up the site, they have the language skills and they can help in that whole process. So it becomes, again, working together. So we've had some success with, again, working with Black churches, and they've offered up their places, and our folks are getting more access to it. I suggest you do the same thing. If somebody speaks, what have you, contact wherever that you know they go, and offer up their place, and you'd be surprised how they're able then to reach that network and be able to get people access to that vaccine. So, okay, hope that helped.
Great idea. Okay, Natalia.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, Ms. Jones.
Good morning.
I'm a PhD student in international relations at Ncba, and I was impressed when I read that you had the opportunity to work at the United Nations. I've been traveling. I was very inspired. But my question is kind of a follow-up question to the previous one on vaccination. I'm learning about race in the States. I'm from Argentina, but I've been here since 2002. And really last year, I started following the news and getting more involved in these issues. And I hear in the news that the Black African Americans are unequally vaccinated, right? They don't have the same access. So my question is this something like the government is like kind of discriminating the locations where they're being sending the vaccines? Or is the lack of access because of, I don't know, lack of education, lack of people to support the Black communities? Where is the discrimination coming from? Or no discrimination, I don't know if discrimination, or where is the inequality coming from? Thank you.
Well, since you've been here since 2002, then you're quite Americanized at this point. Racism, yeah.
Citizen, by the way.
I know, oh, okay. Racism is still very prevalent. And it goes back centuries in this country, and we have never really addressed it in an appropriate manner. I always tell people when they talk about, well, I mean, so many people are doing well now. Karen, look at you, you're doing well now. Well, it doesn't make me feel good that I'm doing well, and I know there's so many other people who aren't. And it's because they've been denied opportunities, they've been denied employment, denied fair housing, denied health access, all based pretty much on just racism. So it's something in this country that we have never grappled with. And you can't say that we've, everybody felt like once we elected Obama, then it was all gone away. No way. And the perfect example is that even though he was elected, they still wouldn't let him pass any major legislation. He got the Affordable Care Act, but I mean, it was always a bombardment of everything, not because he was doing such horrible things, because we just left. I don't want to get too political, but we just had an administration that was doing horrible things. So it had nothing to do with the politics, it had something to do with the race. So we're very bad in this country about dealing with our race issues, and people get offended. I do a lot of Zoom calls right now on trying to help people to understand what African Americans thinking. And by no means am I the spokesperson for all African Americans. I can just tell you that I was on one call and this guy said, well, I'm just so tired of talking about racism. And I said, really? I said, well, imagine having to still live it. You would think at this point we would stop. We're dealing with police brutality still, that goes back centuries. We're dealing with lack of funds in education in communities of color, that goes back centuries. We're dealing with people not having access to health care, healthy food, clean environments, that goes back centuries. And the only thing we can attribute it to is people wanting people who are different, virtue of their color or their ethnicity or their nationality. They wanted a power structure that keeps people in a certain way, rather than looking at them as another human being. Because we know, given opportunity to education and health and all those things, that they contribute to society. But that's not the way this system in this country is set up. And we have done a terrible job in America in addressing that. Though we've had, my organization should not exist. Why should we have an organization specifically working to help African American seniors? Because they've been denied all along the way to have any kind of quality of life when they get older. We want to try to make sure that there's some dignity in their aging when they're older. So that's why we exist. That's why Black Lives Matter has come about. That's why all these organizations Hispanic, Asian, what have you. They all exist because we still in this country want to divide people up based on their ethnicity, race, or what have you. I'm looking now at some of the party participation and everything. And now, of course, the big thrust is changing the voter laws. There we go again, and going back, not even centuries, we going back 50 years to try to deny people the opportunity to vote. It would seem to me that we make voting a holiday where everybody had an opportunity to go and participate. And in the democratic process, whoever gets the most votes win, rather than continuing to come up with these roadblocks to keep people from having an input into what this great democracy is supposed to be about. That's all people wanting to retain power. And when people want to retain power, they have to then step on somebody else, or they have to look down on somebody else. And then that deprives people of opportunity. And that's why I've said earlier, we have to always work on making sure people have an understanding of government, understanding of civics and how things work, because then they'll participate more. And hopefully, you're not going to always get everybody in office that agrees everything 100% of what you believe in, but you at least will have people in there you hope will have the sensitivity and the intelligence to understand that you cannot continue in a system to be successful if you have a group of people who are denied the opportunity to achieve that success. So we're just terrible at dealing with race, and hopefully we will still continue to address it. I'm not extremely optimistic this will be done in the next 3 or 4 years or what have you. It's a long process because it's been centuries, but hopefully we will move to a part that will just say, hey, you know, this person's another human being. I always used to say a long time ago, I'll be so glad when the Martians come, because when they come, we're gonna all be human beings. You won't care. You want to be separated from that. I don't know if you ever watched The Walking Dead. I know my friends say I'm weird, but I love that show. The Walking Dead is about zombies, and the storyline is not so much about the zombies. It's an apocalypse that comes through, but the storyline is how the human beings have to try to fight off those things. And there's never a mention of race. It's all about we're all human beings, and we've got these zombies that are coming after us. And I love that. The same thing with Bridgerton. No mention of race. It's all about everybody's just equal. They just look different. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, those couldn't be further apart.
I know.
But great examples, both. That's awesome. I wanted to give a chance. I know we only have time for maybe one more quick question. And I know Nikki had her hand raised, but I know that she may or may not be able to jump on right now. Because I know she had a conflict. So she was kind of trying to keep her ears open on both sides, but okay. She's not coming back. So I'm going to just ask really very quickly, kind of closing question. I mentioned at the beginning that you were past board member and current member of the Washington Government Relations Group.
Mm-hmm.
So I wondered if you could just give the group a really brief idea of what that is and its role in advanced representation in the government relations realm.
Yeah, well, they were formed maybe about 30 years ago. There was a very small percentage of African-American lobbyists. That's because corporations weren't using them. They were hiring other folks, and they still weren't hiring lobbyists. And I always tell people, you don't have a bad taste about lobbyists. Lobbyists are on both sides. So though I can't call myself a lobbyist because I'm a nonprofit 501c3, an advocate is pretty much a lobbyist. We go and we educate the member on issues that are important to us. Well, that's what lobbyists do. They go in and they educate them. The difference is they bring a check and we just bring all our good faith and hope and love, you know. So And so now you're seeing more and more corporations hire more professionals in federal relations, and they're pretty much just lobbyists. And so this group formed some years ago to try to encourage more, again, corporations and organizations to hire people of color in these positions. And we're seeing a real increase in that. And they get together and they pretty much every meeting have a member of Congress or a major legislative staff person from a committee or what have you to come in and talk about the legislative agenda, what's going on, what do they expect will happen and what have you, just to keep up to date on everything. And I've been a member for a long, long time. And I'm still learning. Every day you go in because the legislation gets filed, or they'll tell you about legislation they're working on that's going to get filed. And you just kind of get a briefing so that you know you can go back, share that with your organization, your corporation, and then they know how to set their policy on how to address that legislation, whether it be pro or con. Sometimes you get information and you hear about things, and that lobbyist or that federal relations person can help have some input in how the legislation is developed based on, again, facts and things that they have found. So it can be a mutual advantage, not only to the member of Congress, but also to the organization you represent. And it's a really exciting job because, yeah, you're up on the Hill, you're getting to meet the members. Again, you're getting to learn about different constituencies, but you really get an idea of how legislation is made and how you can contribute into either changing or having some input on it. So that's what WGRG is. It's just a group of African Americans that got together and said, we're not being included in that, so we'll just start our own and, we move ahead. So they're very active. And, they let people know about jobs that come up. And that's all, every newsletter has, okay, here's an opening in federal relations here, here's this senator is looking for a legislative person here and what have you. So it's a great network for people interested in federal relations and policy.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing conversation. We thank you so much for your time and sharing with us today. So if we can give our virtual round of applause to Ms. Jones for joining us today. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
My pleasure. And some great questions, everybody. And also, please feel free to contact me. I mean, just go in Ncba Aging and you'll find us. And please always feel free to contact me if you have any other information, need information or just want to hear me talk. Okay.
I could keep listening to you talk, actually. It was, but really, I love all the connections to things. We don't think about when there's an organization that focuses on a specific population, you think, okay, that's the population that you're going to hear about. And it's fascinating to hear how just interconnected that your work is to everything, and thinking about, Social Security and the gender gap and all these things. It's really fascinating and a little scary. I'm not going to lie. It's got a big job. So.
We do. We all do. We all do.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, Karyne. Thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure to listen in.
Great. All right. Good luck, everybody.
Stay safe. Be
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. What a great morning. Listening in on, at least, and seeing. I love seeing all the comments and all the discussion. I will not keep you much longer because that's about as much Zoom as anyone can take. I do have some updates on Wednesday since we last spoke, so I will tell you a little about that. But in the vein of knowing you all like debrief and discussion, anything anyone wants to say about a reflection or something learned in these 2 hours?
I want to say that I thought Veronica set it off, our opening moderator. I love the way she navigated that whole conversation. I was able to grasp and hear everything I wanted to hear. She killed it.
You all have come with great questions this morning too.
Yeah. And both speakers said that. So I want to, I want to flag that both as, just for your own sake of being proud, but also to really instill what that means for FIU, that these two women, one who was already very familiar with FIU and one who was newer to interacting with FIU students, both left reinvigorated about what great student advocates FIU has. So.
Yeah, and I appreciated Karyne offering herself up as a contact. If you have other questions, I would encourage you to look up both of these ladies on LinkedIn and definitely take advantage of those opportunities. I mean, really, I think I was most impressed with how far-reaching Karyne's work is with her organization. So I think that there's probably a connection there that any one of you on this screen could make to her organization, even if it was just to have an informational interview to see if there's somebody else in her organization she could connect you to. And boy, has she done it all. So that's a great contact for her to have said, you know, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and most people won't mind. It's great when they say that explicitly or tell you their email or tell you to do it on LinkedIn. If it doesn't come up just because there's so many questions and stuff, these are all people you should be connecting with on LinkedIn with a note about what you found most poignant about their talk or how they inspired you, and follow up with them there. In situations where they didn't give an email and you really want to connect with them over email about something specific, you know, let me know. I'll try to facilitate that. But for general, hi, I want to stay in touch type stuff, you know, it would be great to do that over LinkedIn. And as a reminder for the badge, the topics are policy, communications, and career. So really pay close attention to what comes up from those three things. I've gotten feedback from previous badge participants that maybe it would be better if the badge questions were specific to that individual sessions of who we're meeting. And thus far, I have not quite figured out how to find the time to do that, especially with how last minute some of these things change. So at least for now, you know, you have to talk about what you learned about careers, communications, and policy. So look for those things, like when you all asked her about communicating to her constituency, and also ask for those things as you need them. So you have a well-deserved break until our Honors College event at 3. Tomorrow, you've mostly seen the schedule with Claudia from AOC's office, Batilda from OAS, our amazing panel from the USDA, Charlie Capito. This is confirmed now. Neri Martinez, FIU alumna. Look her up on LinkedIn. She has a lot of background with Republican Party organizations, federal government agencies, corporate government relations, and now just for a few months at the Senate Special Committee on Aging. This was a happenstance connection. We didn't necessarily mean to have this aging theme. We just knew people we wanted to invite, but now that you've met Karyne, it would be very interesting for some of your questions to bring in some stuff you learned from Karyne as you speak with somebody who's on the other end. Karyne's in an advocacy organization. Neri's in the government, in the legislative branch dealing with aging. I have high hopes for some of the questions and comments you will have for her. As I said, I've marked this Honors College one as optional, but the other ones you'll all be there, but you might want to take advantage of that. But the main thing, so we have 2 new sessions on Wednesday now. We're going to start Wednesday with the Women's Congressional Policy Institute. Julia is in communications there, which would provide you some great content for your communications badge assignment. She's going to invite a few other of her colleagues, and I'll let you know when I know who they are. I scheduled this, they wanted 45 minutes. I let it end at 10:30 when this hearing starts, or for those of you who want to tune into that, you still can, at least as of now. But that's not like where you have to be asking questions and stuff. So that still counts as like a mental break a little bit. And then I'm also very excited that for noon, we have Rosalind Gold, who's the Chief Public Policy Officer at the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, also known as NALEO. Laura from this morning also previously worked at NALEO, and look up Rosalind. She has a lot of public policy experience prior to NALEO, and I wanted NALEO included because that's also all about representation in these things. So we look forward to that, and I think everything is still spaced out quite nicely, with still being able to tune into some optional stuff if you like, and still having some time to to decompress. Questions, concerns, I'll send this, I'll keep sending updated things as we go. If you tweet or Instagram or anything like that, tag FIUDC on both of those platforms. We'd love to see it. We'd love to highlight it. Great job this morning. Questions, concerns? All right. I'll see you this afternoon.
All right. Enjoy your lunch, everybody. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.